Hello, I'm Julie Zenner, and I'm here with Duluth Mayor Roger Reinert, who is eager to have one of his quarterly conversations with me and with the people of Duluth. We're going to cover a lot of topics today, probably starting with the budget, which is in the news this week, and also a lot of other things that may be of interest to people in the region. So, Mayor, thank you, first of all, for the invitation to come in here and just sit and visit with you.
Well, thank you for doing it. You know, we've had Greg Grell. The two of you, I think, are civic powerhouses within our public TV realm, but I think also really known for these sorts of conversations. And, you know, if there's something I've learned a year and a half into this work, it's that I think people are hungry for more than 90-second conversations, and these have been really well received. So appreciate you pinch hitting for Greg today.
All right, it's good to see you again. Let's dive right into the budget, because I think that's on a lot of people's minds right now. In recent months, there have been some pretty dire warnings that there was this $7.3 million shortfall for 2026, and that potentially to cover that, the city would have to have some pretty intense measures, such as raising the property taxes by up to 17%, or cutting things by up to that 7.3%. But the proposal that you submitted to the city council doesn't really look anything like that.
Right.
Talk about what your proposal is to meet that challenge coming up next year.
And I think to start with would frame kind of where the deficit is coming from. You know, we are a people-intensive business. 85% of what the city spends money on, so 85 cents of every dollar, is people. It is salaries, it is benefits, it is insurance, it is workers' compensation. And, you know, if you think about it, that shouldn't be too surprising. We don't make a thing, we deliver services, and people deliver those services. And the city is in the same competitive employment market as everyone else. So, you know, as we see wages increase, the city's revenues don't keep pace with that, and that's what gives us the budget deficit, not just next year, but the year after, because we'll see another bump with wages from negotiated contracts. So that kind of sets the stage. And last spring we knew, because we have 7 bargaining units, 6 of them had their contracts settled last year, and Duluth Fire Local 101 had theirs earlier this year. So we knew that this was in the mix, and I tried to flag that for the community last March in my State of the City, and just get us to start thinking about it. And, you know, as you noted, and I discussed with the council, we had sort of a few different options. One was we could just do levy. And if we only did the levy, that would be about 17% this year, and another 10.5% next year. And the 10.5% was based on the 17. So, you know, really, I think fair to say 27.5% levy increase over 2 years. The other option, of course, would be reductions only, which would be a $7.3 million reduction this year, followed by about $5.5 million next year. And a couple of weeks ago, we did a meeting, a finance committee with the council that I asked for, and I kind of said, I don't feel either one of those is sustainable. One reduces city services substantially, and the other is a tax burden that many Duluthians would not be able to afford. And I think important in that mix is an understanding that we're a older than average community compared to the rest of Minnesota, and we are a poorer than average community compared to the rest of Minnesota. So the tax burden is not an academic thing, it's a real thing. So what we brought forward, and we're recording this on Friday, September 5th, what we brought forward yesterday on September 4th was a mix of 6 different strategies to try and address the budget deficit without asking more than I thought was fair of the taxpayers. So the proposal was a 2.7% levy increase, not a made-up number, but actually tied to the trailing 12-month average of the Consumer Price Index, our best indicator of inflation in the economy, which I felt was fair. We're all in our lives paying that inflation and the tariff costs and the city has those expenses as well.
Could I interrupt for
Yeah,
just a
please.
moment? Because one of the numbers that's being thrown out is that it's actually a 4.1%
Yep.
increase. And that it equates to 2.7. For
Yep.
those of us who aren't really numbers people,
Yeah.
can you explain the magic behind
Yeah,
that?
this is so complicated, and I've struggled for a year and a half to figure out the best way to explain what new growth is, and I don't know that I've quite found. I've spent most of my life as a teacher, and usually I can find good analogies. I haven't found it yet for this one, but when we have additional tax base growth. In this case, the city of Duluth tax base, because I always try to remind folks we're not the only thing on your property taxes. It's the city, the county, the school district, and a few other things. But in this case, we had 1.4% of additional growth in the city of Duluth tax base. When that happens, we have two choices. We can capture that revenue, which means some additional money coming in that doesn't raise anybody's taxes, or choose not to capture that. And it would actually lower, in this case, your taxes by 1.4%. So the total is 4.1, but it's bought down by that new growth of 1.4. So the effective rate, an actual average increase, would be 2.7%.
All right, thanks for the little detour.
Yeah.
Now back
I don't know that was a helpful
no,
one.
back on track. I'm sorry if I got you off of it for a moment.
Yeah. So, the levy is just one of multiple strategies. And I think important to help folks understand that it's only about a quarter of what we need to do to address that looming budget deficit. Another quarter we can accomplish with resources we already have, different management of our community trust fund. We have our budget manager went through every single line item of the budget and found places where we consistently budget for the worst case scenario. And instead, she brought that back to what has proven to be the average expense in that individual area. So great example, budgeting for the 1991 snowstorm in terms of plowing. Well, that's not what we've seen over the last several years. So budgeting more accurately, as well as creating a contingency fund. So if we do get the 1991 snowstorm, we'll be able to plow the streets. Another significant budget area that we propose to address is we've seen overtime in our fire department steadily increase to the point where next year it's budgeted to be a $2 million line item all by itself.
Overtime.
Just 1 year of overtime in Duluth Fire, yeah. And, folks, if you do the math, a 1% levy increase is worth about $400,000. So, help me do the math at home, but that's like 6%, 6 or 7% of the levy just in one line item. So we're going to create a float pool that helps fill the vacancies when somebody calls in sick or has a family issue instead of having to mandate overtime. And that will actually dramatically reduce that line item. And then, another major piece is looking at, we currently have over 55 open positions. The city of Duluth is about 920 employees, about 55 currently open positions. So the city administrator with a small executive group is looking at every single one before a hiring decision is made. Is that a critical position? Is it a publicly facing position? Can that work be combined with any other work? So great example is in one department, we had both a project coordinator and a project manager. That's going to now be one position. We get this work done without a dramatic impact to the work and a cost savings to the taxpayers. So all those strategies combined, we feel confident can get us to where we need to be with a pretty minimal levy increase.
Mm-hmm. Of course, the people out there say to themselves, how will this impact me? Mm-hmm. How will my taxes go up? What services will I have to do without because the city is in this financial situation? Yeah. Can you provide some insights into what you see the average Duluth citizen or the average Duluth business feeling because of these cuts?
So, at this point, we don't anticipate dramatic service reductions. Mm-hmm. As we've gone through, and I think it's important, it's such a great question because historically the city has addressed situations like this, and it's not the first time, either with dramatic reductions in service or dramatic increases in property tax. And we approach this saying, we don't have to do either one of those. Like, we can take a different viewpoint on this. And one of the things I'm really grateful for is we have some incredibly smart and talented people that work for the city. And when we really said, and it's interesting, last year I said something similar, and I don't think people believed me, but in year two, they're like, oh, I think maybe he does mean this. I said, bring us your ideas, especially folks that have been with the organization for a long time. Be bold, be creative with your suggestions. And so, we're putting together a budget based on a couple principles. Number one, focus on core city services. That's, public safety between police and fire. That's 2/3 of city employees. And you add in public works, that's 3/4. So that really is what the city of Duluth does. But we also know people are passionate about our park system, and people are passionate about the library system. So those publicly facing services have to be a priority. But we also have a lot of administrative and support functions. And there are opportunities for us to structure that differently so that we're preserving the publicly facing services. And if we have to be more efficient, it's on sort of the back end side of our operation. And again, I just remind folks, we're over 900 employees, $115 million general fund. I mean, we have the opportunity to do some things differently without dramatically impacting services. And on the financial side, an inflation-only increase is hard to determine without knowing what someone's actual home value is. But based on the average home value, which now in Duluth is around $260,000, that's roughly $15 a year. So we think a pretty minimal ask from our residents to help pay for the things that they want. Because I'll often get the email that says, hey, don't touch this, this, or this, but also decrease my property taxes. And it's like, well, this is how I always say, taxes are the way we collectively buy things that we could never buy ourselves, So a street system, a utility system, a police department, a fire department, a community library, a community park system.
Mm-hmm. I imagine this is a little bit subjective, but as you look at the services that the city provides, and you're coming in, roughly halfway through your term.
It's hard to believe.
Do you see city services that would fall into the nice but not necessary sort of a category?
I think that's a great question. And I think there is more a must-do and opportunity for partnership delineation. And I think, I define the must-do as no one else is going to do them for us. So our street system, our water, our sewer, our natural gas, our police service, our fire department. If we stop doing them tomorrow, no one else is going to do it. They're just not going to get done. And so they are the most critical services people expect from city government, and really is why local government exists, that utility provision and the public safety functions. The opportunity for us to be more inviting of partnership is kind of in that second tier, really represented by both parks and library. And so it's one of the reasons that folks have heard me repeatedly, maybe ad nauseum at this point, but I'm not going to stop, talk about what is the regional opportunity here. And the library is such a good example. We have the only library in the southern half of St. Louis County, and that library serves a regional population. Depending on when you pull the data, somewhere around 1/3 to up to 40% of library card holders for the City of Duluth Library do not live in the City of Duluth. So that means, Duluth taxpayers are supporting a regional library, only one community. And so I've actually begun those conversations with what I call our near neighbors, Hermantown, Rice Lake, and Proctor, just saying, if I had to, and I want to be clear, this is not on the table, but if I had to close the library tomorrow, those mayors would also hear about it because their residents use the Duluth Library and they care about. I had an email last week from somebody who lives in Howard Ganeson Township. I am passionate about the Duluth Library. I really advocate for you not to make any reductions there. And, my response to this person said, and this really illustrates part of our problem. You are passionate, you use it, but you don't pay anything for it. So, to the degree that we can think about a regional library system that really encompasses those 4 communities and the neighboring townships, A regional park system, same model, those 4 communities and adjacent townships. We'd have a better service. We would get those things out from under cops, firefighters, and streets and utilities, and we'd actually provide better access, I think. So a couple weeks ago, I did have a meeting with the other mayors and their city administrators to start that conversation. And I think it's fair to say there's no commitment yet, but they're interested because they understand the dynamics of, they understand those fiscal dynamics.
Mm-hmm. Of course, property taxes are only a piece of the revenue puzzle for the city.
Yeah.
Are there other revenue streams that could potentially tick upward and help fill some of those budgetary gaps that you anticipate?
Yes, but really minor. We are looking at other earned revenue opportunities. Are there places where we're not covering the cost of the services that we provide? State law and consistent federal court rulings have held that you can charge a fee to capture the cost of a service. You can't charge a fee to make money. But there are some places where we're not capturing the cost of a service provided. So we've sent the team back to do their math there. There are some things like right now we absorb every time somebody uses a credit card to pay for something, especially permit fees or things like that, we absorb that cost. And I think many of us now see that cost being passed along. I'm a runner. I sign up for races all the time. Here's my, $25 race entry and then the $3.50 handling charge and credit card fee for making that registration. For us, that's a $60,000 to $75,000 annual expense, and things like that add up pretty quickly. But I think something I'd hit on with that question, Julie, is the city of Duluth's revenue really comes from 3 things. It is our 1% sales tax, it is property tax, but far and away it's local government aid, just money we get from the state of Minnesota. And that to me is really concerning because when I was a city councilor, we watched the governor 2 years in a row take that money back at the very end of the calendar year when we'd already set the budget and set the tax levy. And at that point, literally the only thing we could do was cut positions. So we do need to continue to really prioritize growing that tax base, that new tax base growth that we talked about earlier, because it allows us to invest in city services without asking more from the taxpayers and makes us less reliant on local government aid, which right now is 34% of our budget is LGA.
And we'll talk about some of those growth strategies in a bit, but as we sit here this morning and you made your presentation last night to the City Council, your proposal actually has been kind of out there in the public for a couple of days leading up to it. What are you hearing so far from people?
I think my takeaway the day after is there's really no difference between 2.7% and like 15%. Anything more than 0 for a group of folks is unacceptable. I guess I appreciate that. Again, I will say that my perspective on taxes is this is the way we collectively buy things that we couldn't buy ourselves. I will still argue, I feel good about the proposal. I think it is fair. And I will remind folks, last year we did 0. We didn't increase the levy for the first time in a decade. So what that meant is last year we ate the inflationary and the wage pressures that everyone else is seeing in the economy. While still making a couple critical investments. And largely we were able to do that because we had 2% new growth last year. So some significant new revenue. But moving forward, and I was, it's always interesting to me, people hear what they want to hear and they forget the other part. So even when I said last year we would do 0%, I said, that is not likely to be something you can expect every year because the economics of a large organization, that's just also not sustainable. So, but it is, I joked this morning over coffee as I was getting ready. I'm like, well, my lesson learned today is there's not much difference between 2.7 and 15. There's still going to be a whole bunch of people that are upset because it was more than 0. Yet many of those I know would say, but I care about the library or the park, or I really want police, or I love our firefighters, don't touch those. And it's just not a la carte. You don't get to pick. When you choose to live in a community, you choose to also invest in the community services that community offers.
Mm-hmm. And what sense do you get from the city council itself as far as its appetite for adopting your proposal?
I think that the council understands where we're coming from in terms of trying to resolve this pretty significant deficit while not being unreasonable with taxpayers. My sense last night from our presentation and then the Q&A after, there are definitely some councilors that are wondering if they want to go higher in order to have, I think, one of them talked about it as a cushion, because again, the max levy is the max. It could be less, cannot be more. I've never in 20 years of public service seen the levy come down once it's set. So I often think the max is the levy. In my response last night a couple different times was we feel very confident we can make this budget work with those numbers. And then we'll have a full budget retreat with the council sometime mid-fall before the formal budget is put on the council agenda in December.
Mm-hmm. So that's the process going forward.
Right. So a two-step as required by state law, the levy must be set by the end of September. The budget must be adopted by the end of December. So that's, as I said, when I was a counselor, that's where we experienced a couple really tough years at the beginning of the Great Recession where we'd already set the levy by the end of September. We'd even already voted on the budget in December, and then the governor at that time, unallotted, took back LGA, which is consistently our largest source of revenue, and that had, direct impacts to city operations.
Mm-hmm. Operating challenges are just the beginning. You also have a backlog of capital projects that need to be done. What are your priorities over in that pile?
Sure.
And how do you see the resources coming forward to get those projects done?
Yeah, one of the things, and it's not just because it's what everybody talks about in Duluth, it's because I live here too, and actually live on the hillside streets. We are a city that was once 110,000 people. We're now about 87,000 people, but we still have that infrastructure for 110,000 people. So we really have a couple options. One is grow the population, especially housing around existing infrastructure, and housing is something we desperately need. That incrementally adds additional users, so small additional cost. But a lot of additional revenue to help support that existing infrastructure. And this is something, if I could have Duluthians care about one thing, it would be the age of both our streets and our utilities. You see the streets by driving around. We have roughly 500 miles that just the city maintains. There's some that the state, some that the county does. And we're doing about 17 miles a year, so that's not the best math. That takes a long time to refresh the system. But what people don't see is what's under the streets, and that's the sewer lines and the water lines, both of which are around 90 years old on average. So great example, last year we had a water line collapse under Grand Avenue out near the Grand Avenue, Central Avenue intersection, took out 4 lanes of Grand Avenue with that collapse. That was an original water line.
Wow.
The original line, never been replaced. So it was, I think, 89 years old. And the life expectancy on water and sewer lines is around 50. So we're really stretching those things out. And we have to make that even more of a priority. So a couple things. The water and sewer lines are replenished with the utility. So when you pay your comfort systems bill, factored in is replacing lines. That needs to continue to be a top priority. But streets really come from a couple different sources. We have the general fund dollars that go into our streets. We have a sales tax that we use to help do more streets each year. And then I would argue we should go back to having an assessment also. If the street near your home gets redone, that directly is a benefit to you, and it actually improves your property value as well. And it's something that the city did year after year after year, I mean, many, many years, decades. And then when it adopted the sales tax, it stopped doing that. And it really needs to be a both and if we're going to do enough miles each year to really make a difference in this backlog of street maintenance. So that's something we'll talk about with the city council yet this fall before the budget is adopted. The other major area the city really needs to be thoughtful about is just our inventory of land and buildings. The city is a collector of things, and so we have not just parks and not just green space, but just property. I asked about a month ago for a list of all the property that the city owns, and the response from staff was, we don't think we can give you that. It is so extensive. And then, of course, we have a lot of buildings the city owns, many of which are not in great shape. And so, we need to do a better job of looking at, can 7 buildings be one? Mm-hmm. And are there things that the city can divest itself of? I'm a big believer in doing less and doing it better. And I think that also matches what we can realistically expect for revenue for the foreseeable future.
Mm-hmm. Going back to utilities, there was a media report about a week or so ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, that Duluth could stand to potentially receive nearly $64 million to replace the lead water service lines. What are you hearing in terms of the potential for those dollars to actually come to fruition? Yeah, no, we have been awarded, so we've not physically received them, but that is money that will come to the city. I mean, really fantastic news. Next to Minneapolis and St. Paul, Duluth has the most lead water lines in the state of Minnesota. That's not any blame on past leaders. That is the age of the city. Right. We became a major city at a time when that was the go-to way of providing a water service within a municipality. We've been doing a really good job targeting our older neighborhoods of replacing lead lines. And I'm sorry for those of you where it's happening in your neighborhood because you can't get anywhere in Lincoln Park right now because of lead water line replacement. You see it out in West Duluth as well, along Grand Avenue. Was out that way this morning, but that's a good thing. We're getting those things done, and it actually gets done pretty quickly. When it's your turn, it's in under less than 2 weeks. And I just want to encourage folks, if you haven't taken a look, you can go online and see, is there a lead water line for my home? And if it is not yet determined, you can call Comfort Systems and they'll come in and test your line. I know living in the Central Hillside, we did that at our house. But this is really great news. We've been doing about 500 to 1,000 each year, and that will dramatically increase that number. So we're really grateful from the state's help. We're really grateful for the state's help in getting more lead water lines done. Mm-hmm. Let's turn to economic development and what you see as the real positive steps taking place right now to attract new businesses and to attract new residents.
Yeah, I mean, we've really seen some significant wins, especially on our commercial tax base side. If you go and talk to our team, and first of all, I just have to give a huge shout out to our economic development team. They're a small, really small component within the scope of City Hall, but doing a fantastic job. Ben Van Tassel, who's our Director of Planning and Economic Development, Tricia Hobbs, who is our Manager of Economic Development, as well as the Executive Director for DEDA, our Economic Development Authority, are just crushing it. We are really working on that mantra that Duluth is a difficult place to do business. We want our attitude to be, how do we get to yes? We want to make things happen. Sometimes we have to say no, but nobody is better positioned to describe what yes looks like than we are. So if we do say no, I want our staff to offer alternatives. And we're starting to see that bear fruit. We're getting inquiries from outside of Duluth about interest in doing projects, both commercial as well as residential. And one of the problems that I guess is a good problem to have is we're running out of commercial development space within the city. We're seeing that western corridor start to fill up with things like the investment in Sofidel, the paper plant, the Amazon delivery center, the movement of Second Harvest out to the Atlas site. So, and one of the things that's fascinating to me that I don't think a lot of Duluthians know is we continue to be a manufacturing hub. So you think about Cirrus, you think about Altec, who makes the bucket trucks, you think about Sofidel, the investment in the paper plant now bringing, going to consumer finished products. All of these things are high, Moline Machinery, all these things are higher end manufacturing, high skill manufacturing. And what they will tell you when you go tour and visit with them is their single biggest obstacle is not being able to hire. Mm-hmm. Like we've spent a couple generations telling young people don't go into manufacturing, it's dirty, it's hard, it's not glamorous. First of all, that's not what manufacturing is anymore. Really pays well, it's really clean, it's really high tech. And the other thing I would just add on this topic, and I don't know that it's something a lot of Duluthians are tracking, but we are becoming a national spot for manufacturing and connected to artificial intelligence. So we have had a number of organizations look at Duluth, and some are already planting their seeds here for underwater autonomous research, for surface level water autonomous, because we have beautiful Lake Superior right there. And then a highlight of a local business that's already taking off, Bot Crew. They do terrestrial, so land autonomous vehicles that do things like pull cable under solar fields or remote mowing of ditches that are too steep for people to do. I had a chance to go down and tour their facility, and it's the classic, started almost in a garage kind of thing, and could be the next Cirrus, and we have them located here in what is becoming a hub of manufacturing and technology. So very bullish on that end of the economy, but far and away our single biggest challenge is having the housing for the workforce that's going to require.
Mm-hmm. Before we get to housing, you mentioned Atlas and the success that there's been with Atlas Industrial Park, and a shortage now, potentially, of new sites. Are there additional brownfield sites that the city is looking at right now to potentially clean up and develop for additional sites? Because you can't really create new land. You can just reuse the land that you have. Well,
and Julie, this is that is something that we don't talk enough about. Like, we are a constrained community. Mm-hmm. We are the only regional center in Minnesota that literally cannot geographically grow. I noticed Rochester annexed 400 acres to build more housing. We can't. We have 3 neighbors on our borders and a lake. I mean, we literally cannot geographically grow, so we have to use what we already have. And I think we don't have major brownfields that are just waiting for us to do cleanup and bring online. Our challenge is going to be how do we look at the inventory that's already there? So again, coming back to whether it's city-owned or county tax forfeit, maybe privately owned, but it's just been dormant for a long, long time. We have to go through and make an analysis of all of those parcels. And we need to especially look at ones that are already adjacent to utilities. If I can encourage people to do one thing, it's read a book called Strong Towns by Chuck Marone, who really highlights that we're really good at building things, we're really bad at maintaining them. So each time, we talk about developing, I'm curious about, what's the road and utility infrastructure? If we're going to be building all new, we might be able to financially afford that today, but I'm gifting some mayor 20 or 30 years down the road a huge liability in maintaining that. And so the challenge for our staff is where the housing and commercial development opportunities that are a tear down or a redevelopment or a development, but there are already utilities there, both road, water, sewer, natural gas, so that we're not creating a deferred maintenance liability for somebody else down the road, but yet creating those opportunities in today's economy.
Mm-hmm. And you've really turned the spotlight on the downtown area for some of that residential development.
Right. Yeah.
How is that coming together at
hard.
this point?
It's hard.
I know there have been projects where there there were housing units promised, and then
Yeah.
some of those morphed into short-term rentals.
Yeah.
And there are some concerns over that.
Yeah, and I think-
what are the challenges and the opportunities?
Downtown remains the best opportunity for housing in Duluth. I mean, I really am passionate about it being our newest neighborhood. And that's because the data of who needs housing all points to a downtown. It is young professionals that are looking for housing in our community, either rental or for purchase. I always say it's professionals with no kids. I'm in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath family home, and that's not what a professional with no kids should be in. It is, I don't like using the word empty nester. I don't like using retirees. I've decided it's a third chapter of life folks. Who are either here already and want to stay in our community, or increasingly are choosing Duluth and coming from somewhere else. And they also want a, one level, low maintenance, somebody else, is doing snow and grass and all those sorts of things. They can take off for a while and not have to have somebody keep an eye on their house sort of thing. All of those point to a downtown lifestyle. The challenge is, and we have the space available post-COVID for sure, as we've seen a downtown, and we've seen this happen across the country, go from retail to commercial to professional to 40% vacant space post-pandemic. The single huge challenge that we can't figure out is it's costly to convert commercial to residential. A great example is you might have a commercial building that on an entire floor has 2 bathrooms. Well, now you need 28 bathrooms. I mean, just to replumb a building to make it residential, divided up into a number of units, is very, very costly. We tried to work with the state last year to get a tax credit to help with that. Some folks have used a historic preservation credit. That's not the best tool. Interest rates continue to stay high, so that's not helpful. But that conversion cost is our single biggest challenge. So we continue to try to figure that out. And of course, more people downtown. Downtown Duluth is a great example. When there are things happening downtown, it feels like a downtown should feel. When there aren't things happening downtown, then you see more of the folks that are struggling with being unhoused or more problem behaviors just because it's empty. So it not only helps meet our housing need, but it also helps bring the energy and vitality that we want in our downtown. But it's a struggle. It's a really difficult problem to solve, and it's not unique to Duluth. It's all across the country. Communities of any size are trying to figure out how do we better use downtowns. And in Duluth's case, clearly residential downtown, and also just given proximity to Canal Park and the Lake Walk and Lake Superior.
Mm-hmm. What about the challenge of changing perceptions about downtown? You mentioned that when there isn't a lot of activity going on there, people worry about safety, they worry about crime. Are you feeling some success at turning those perceptions around with some of the tangibles that are happening in the downtown to clean it up a little bit?
No. And I wish we could. And I think that's just, we live in a weird era right now where social media narratives sort of become truth, even though the facts don't support that. But, I would encourage folks to go for a walk. I did it the other day with some of our city leaders and community partners, and it is definitely block by block. You can have a challenging block like First Street, where the pawn shop, and we have the buildings that we're trying to get down, but are fighting in court over that. The very next block is $1 billion investment by Ascension in a new hospital. We even walked in the alleys, and it's just very block by block. So painting downtown with one broad brush is inaccurate, and it's also not a very effective strategy. You can go and talk to folks like the Generoos that have a high-end jewelry store in the Grace Lawn building. They'll tell you that last year was their best year in business. You can talk to Ben Mork at Mainstream, and he'll tell you the same thing. They're destinations that people will go to, and so they're doing well, and their little spots of downtown are doing well. And I would point to, we finally got the Cozy down after years of it being a problematic property. We are almost done taking the shoppers ramp down, it's literally being deconstructed piece by piece because of how it was built into the building next to it. We have the Ordine building conversion, and on the other end of downtown, almost 300 new units coming online with the Lakeview 333 project. So definitely significant wins, but those individually have not yet, I think, changed the narrative that downtown is unwelcoming or unsafe. And what I would just encourage people to do is actually come downtown, and you will see that we have some similar challenges to other communities, but we also have a lot of really good things going for us. And if I could have folks do one thing, it's go visit another downtown. I had a chance to take a long weekend in August off, and was in New England and visited another community of our size, and came home going, we're actually doing pretty well. We're definitely moving in the right direction. We certainly have more work to do, but I am bullish on downtown Duluth. And I would argue, we all must be, because downtown Duluth is not just the heart of our one community. There is, this to me is just a kind of a mind-blowing statistic. There is not another community Duluth size in 36,000 square miles. You have to go to Fargo on one end, Green Bay on the other, Thunder Bay to the north, and the Twin Cities to the south to have a community the size of Duluth. So we're the regional center for all of northeastern Minnesota and all of northwestern Wisconsin. So that's both beneficial and also a challenge.
One of the primary downtown residents is Minnesota Power, and a number of residents and area politicians have expressed some concerns about the proposed sale of Minnesota Power to BlackRock. Is the city taking a position on that, or do you stand back and kind of say that's a business deal?
No, we've not taken a position on that, primarily because the state, we have a city PUC, but that really is focused on comfort systems, on city-run utilities. They make those decisions about investments and setting rates. So the controversial thing our local PUC has done is set rates necessary for us to do the work that we're required to do at the Lakewood Water Treatment Plant, as well as some of our arterial connections. But in the case of Minnesota Power and the BlackRock acquisition, that really is a state public utilities commission. So no, we haven't taken a position on that.
You mentioned before we sat down, or as we were sitting down, you'd like to talk about Lester Park.
Oh, great. Yeah. So, I think the two things as I kind of forecast the next 4 months, the rest of the year, the budget certainly, and we spent some time talking about that, but the other thing has to be the former Lester Park Golf Course. It was something I heard consistently on the campaign trail. We're now coming up on the 6th year of it being dormant. And I approached that issue last year by establishing a working group to try and come up with what might be some alternatives for use there, really charge them to look at year-round activities, to look at other models of ownership. At kind of a base level, I don't think the city should be in the golf course business, even though we still operate another one. It just doesn't fall into that core city service category. And while the working group did not come up with a solution, and I know that was frustrating for some, especially those who were hoping they would say, we can open it tomorrow and you can just bring your own lawnmower out and mow it and that'll work. Turns out that's not a viable model. The working group did really point us in the right direction. They said, year-round activity, connect the trails, the hiking trails, the biking trails, the cross-country ski trails. You've got a city park across the street. You've got a bus stop. You've got a grocery store in walking distance. So one of the great opportunities at Lester is housing. And if we look at the entire parcel, we feel strongly that there's an opportunity to have golf, to have green space, to have trail connections, to have a clubhouse that also serves as a restaurant option in a part of our community that really doesn't have a lot of food and beverage options, and probably 500 units of housing. And those would be if the city could design, and a developer would have a lot of say in this, but those would be for purchase, a lot of one level. For older residents who are looking to stay on the eastern side of town but get out of a 2,500 square foot home and into maybe a 12 or 1,400 square foot one level, as well as some executive. Because here's the thing that we don't talk a lot about. We have a need in our community, and our recent housing studies showed this, for about 15% of the market to be sort of that high-end executive level. And what happens when we don't have that is those folks are still here, and they still have substantial incomes. They just buy the home that maybe you and I might be looking for, that middle income home, and then drive the price up because they have more money to do it with. And we hear that story over and over again. So if we could add 500 units of housing at Leicester, maintain the green space, connect the trails, have the some food and beverage option, I think we'd have a real win at Leicester. And that also would, again, kind of coming full circle, help us grow our tax base as well as meeting a critical housing need. So I fully anticipate before the end of the year bringing the city council a proposal on the sale of Leicester for that purpose based on the results of the working group last year. So we don't know exactly what that looks like yet. That's an aspirational goal at this point. It's not something I can say will happen on a specific date. But I want the council to have to consider that, because we just can't continue to let, we come back to land availability. We can't continue to let it just sit there. It not only is emotionally heavy for a lot of folks, but it really is not the image that we want to be presenting as a community.
Mm-hmm. You are, as we mentioned before, approaching your midway point in this term. As you look back at what you had in mind entering, how much of what you thought you could get done have you gotten done? and how much has remained?
A lot remains. We started and continue to talk about really 5 big issues. Housing across all income levels, a fundamental belief that, and we saw this in the Minneapolis model. The Fed Reserve wrote a really good article about this. When you get inventory, all sorts of inventory, all the types in all the neighborhoods, you're actually able to hold rental prices down and hold sale prices down, because supply and demand is a thing, especially in the housing market. So we're not doing enough of that. We need to do a lot more of it. And if there's another read that I could recommend for people, it's the relatively recent book titled Abundance, because it really speaks to how we have used zoning and building codes to really make housing a scarcity. And from a mindset of, I've got mine and I want to protect the value of mine, so I don't want you to have yours. And both Strong Towns and Abundance combined give us a sense of the changes we need to be making using our existing infrastructure, our existing land, while making it much, much easier to build within our community to meet those housing needs. I think we've done a good job of prioritizing streets and utilities, another one of my big issues. But I don't think I fully appreciated the scale of the deferred maintenance challenge that we have. So continue to plug away at that. Downtown was another one, and we've talked a little bit about that. We're making progress. Shoppers and Cozy are things that sat for years that we're finally moving forward on, but certainly more work to do. So housing at all income levels, affordable property taxes is another one. I'm very proud that we did do 0% last year. Many said it couldn't be done, but we made the leadership decision that we would give people a breather, pump the brakes a bit. Those issues continue to be the issues. I think, Julie, what I did not appreciate coming in was the role of, there's no box of mayor magic wands. A year and a half in, I have not found it yet, but people think there is. So I routinely get either they don't know where else to go, so they come to the mayor, even when it's not a city issue. They don't know county commissioners exist. They don't know who else to. As one of my friends likes to say, you're not mayor of Duluth, you're like the governor of northern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, and the UP of Michigan, because they get our news, so they know who the mayor of Duluth is. They may not even know who their own mayor is. So that's both, it can be a reward when you can help solve problems, but a challenge when you have to help explain, well, that's not a city issue, not something that I can do for you. Or even in the case of the city, we have a full-time city administrator whose job is day-to-day city hall operations. So in many cases, I have to try to take something that's been brought to the mayor and work it back down maybe 4 levels in the organization to the person who's best positioned to try and resolve that issue. So I think that understanding that the mayor is external and more vision and direction, while the city administrator is internal and operations, was a big first-year learning for me. And then I think the understanding that the executive authority vested in the mayor is really more suggesting than it is ordering or demanding. We have a lot of stakeholders that are partners in the work we do, so you don't get to just say, make it so. For those of you who are old Star Trek fans, it is more repetition. This is where we're headed. This is what I want to see happen. This is where we need to be going to. And then I think the third thing that I would just add in, and this is not something I would expect that the public is tracking, but almost our entire leadership team has changed in the first year and a half. Some of those were intentional decisions I made coming in the door. Some of those were folks who were probably I think I am going to go elsewhere. This maybe isn't what I signed up for. And some of those were me actively recruiting people to come in and join our team. And, now just past the year and a half mark, I think we really have the nucleus of a leadership team that is rowing in the same direction, understands my vision, is on board with that vision, and is really starting to gel as a team. And, that sounds like maybe words, but it is a real thing. And we're really starting to see the benefit of that. And I would just add, we have, I think, a really great city council that's also trying to row in the same direction. And that can't be discounted. You can make and suggest all you want, but without a city council that's willing to back you up, whether it's organizational changes or a 2% levy or whatever it might be, you're really pretty limited in the amount of change that you can bring.
Mm-hmm. And I imagine your experience as a past city councilor and as a state lawmaker, both of those experiences have to give you some insight into the capabilities and the limitations of those partners that you have to work with.
Yeah, and I think my time in the legislature was really helpful for me understanding, many of my colleagues are still there. Mm-hmm. So the personal relationships are beneficial, but understanding also the choices that they're having to make. So, last year we were disappointed to not see an increase in LGA, but fully celebrated a win in not having LGA cut. I had a full appreciation of the choices that they were trying to make. And then, what's interesting is definitely have an appreciation for the demands of being a city councilor. But I would suggest that, I served from 2005 to, for 4 years from 2005 until 2009 when I became a legislator. It has just fundamentally changed. Social media has really changed what public service looks like. The dynamics and the work that the city does has fundamentally changed. So while it's helpful that I served at one time because there's some historical knowledge, I can share with counselors, well, when I was this is what but it really,
because people always love that.
Yes, right. Yes. Hey, you're old. No, it is also a deep appreciation for me that from 2005 to now 20 years have passed, and it's just fundamentally different, the service of counselors now from the opportunity I had to serve back then.
Mm-hmm. Last question. There was a recent Star Tribune editorial where you stressed the importance of optimism
Right.
in approaching Duluth's challenges. Why is that important, and what gives you the greatest hope in Duluth's future?
Well, I think just being alive in our community. It was in response to a different editorial that was a little bit more pessimistic about Duluth's future. And, I say this on occasion, and I probably could say it more, but there are times at which I think again, I've said this several times, I think it really is driven by social media. It is, we are being sort of acculturized to go down negative rabbit holes because of the analytics of social media feeds. And I think sometimes it is so important to unplug from that. And I can almost get emotional talking about this. Go out in the community, go for a walk. Well, hike a trail, go for a run, spend some time with your neighbors. I made 8 stops on National Night Out, and it was the most rejuvenating thing that I could do. It was exhausting trying to do that within a really short period of time, but at every single one, people were connecting with their neighbors. They were telling me how much they love their neighborhoods, from east to Duluth to the western part of the community, and we're just that's grateful to get to call this place home. And I think there are a lot of opportunities for us to take a step back and remember that this is a uniquely amazing place that we get to live. And I don't know, that fills me with optimism, and I think it does many Duluthians as well. So.
All right. Well, Mayor Roger Reinert, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Julie. It was great to see you again. Yeah.
And thank you to all of you who chose to sit in and watch this conversation. It shows that you really care about your community and want what's best for it. So have a great day.